I was driving through Montana alone. No real plan, just taking time off and heading wherever the road led. Around late afternoon, I pulled into a national forest area I saw on the map. Nothing big or popular, just a small clearing with maybe 5 or 6 camping spots, a single pit toilet on one side, and a weathered sign with some faded forest rules. It was quiet, no ranger station, no office, just open camping with a donation box nailed to a post. I hadn't seen another car for the last half hour before pulling in, so it felt a bit remote, but peaceful. When I pulled up, I noticed 2 tents already pitched on the far side of the loop. One was dark green, kind of sagging on one side, and the other was a newer-looking gray dome tent. A red SUV was parked near them, maybe 10 or 15 yards off. I couldn't see the people clearly, but I heard low voices, just soft talking, casual, maybe a man and a woman. There was a dog too. I couldn't see it, but I heard a few sharp barks while I was getting out of my car. I waved toward the tents out of habit. Someone waved back. I remember that clearly. Just a single figure in a red flannel shirt stepping out of the trees behind the tents and giving a quick, casual wave. I waved again, but he didn't say anything. He just turned and went back behind the tents. I picked the spot farthest from them. I always try to give people space when camping, especially in quiet places like this. My site was at the edge of the loop, near a slight slope that led down to a creek. You could hear the water faintly if you stood still. I set up my tent, cooked something quick, just a can of chili heated over my little burner, and turned in early. I'd been driving most of the day, and my back was sore. I remember thinking it felt nice to be out in the woods, alone but not completely alone. It helped knowing there were other people nearby. There was no cell signal, which I expected, so I turned my phone off and put it in my bag. I slept fine. It wasn't cold, just cool enough for the sleeping bag to feel comfortable. I remember hearing a dog bark once in the middle of the night. Quick, sharp, and then nothing. Maybe a coyote wandered too close. Other than that, the forest was quiet. In the morning, I got up around 7. I stepped out of the tent, stretched, and made some instant coffee with my camp stove. While the water was heating up, I looked over toward the other campsites, thinking I'd go over and say hi. I didn't want to be weird the night before by approaching too late, but the tents were gone. At first I thought maybe they packed up early and left, but something felt off right away. There was no car. The red SUV was gone. No sound of an engine, no dust trail, no headlights the night before. I looked around more carefully, expecting to see signs, tire tracks, maybe some flattened grass where the tents had been, or the square outline of a tent footprint in the dirt. But the ground was smooth, natural, not disturbed at all. I walked over to where I'd seen the tents. I couldn't even figure out exactly where they had been. There was no burnt wood from a fire ring, no dry patch of grass, no wrappers, no signs of camping at all. The bushes nearby didn't look bent or broken. It looked like no one had been there for weeks. I looked around a while, thinking maybe I was just confused and maybe the tents were a little farther down the loop. But there was nothing. No signs of them. No boot prints. No dog tracks. Not even a broken twig. I kept standing there, confused. I knew I'd seen them. I heard the dog, the voices. I remember the red flannel shirt. That part was clear in my head. I saw the man wave to me. I can still picture it. How he lifted his arm just once before stepping back into the trees. It didn't feel like a dream. It wasn't a trick of the light. I saw him. I told myself maybe they had left earlier than I thought. Maybe they were quiet packing up. Maybe they were experienced campers who cleaned up really well. But it didn't add up. Even the best campers leave some trace. Tent indentations, disturbed grass, tire tracks, something. I walked around the whole campsite, slowly, checking the dirt. I've camped a lot and I've seen good cleanups, but never like this. It was like they were never there. I started feeling weird then. Not scared exactly, but unsettled. I started doubting myself. Maybe I imagined more than I thought. Maybe I was just tired from driving and made assumptions. But that wave, I keep coming back to it. The way he looked. Just a guy in a red flannel, standing half in shadow, lifting his hand like someone saying, "Hey," not dramatic, not eerie, just normal. I went back to my site and finished my coffee. I sat there for a while, looking at the treeline. It was too quiet now. Not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet. I packed up slower than usual, double-checked all my gear. My hands felt shaky even though I didn't feel scared, just confused. Before I drove off, I circled the campsite loop one more time. Drove it real slow, windows down, listening, looking, nothing. It was like I was the only person who had ever been there. I left and didn't stop driving until I hit a gas station an hour down the road. I sat there, refueling, thinking about asking the clerk if anyone else had come through from that direction. But I didn't. I didn't want to sound crazy. I never figured it out. I looked online afterward to see if anyone had written about that place. Any missing persons or stories or strange sightings? Nothing. Just a few hiking blogs saying it was a quiet, lightly used campground. I still think about it sometimes, especially when I go camping alone. That moment sticks with me. Seeing someone wave, feeling that normal sense of shared space in the woods, and then nothing. No proof, no trace. Just me and a clear memory of people who, as far as I can tell, were never there. We had driven up to northern Pennsylvania, deep into the state forest, way past any cell service or marked campsites. It was me, my friend Tyler, and his cousin Nate. We wanted something isolated, something that felt like real camping. Just a few miles of dirt road, a clearing we found on a map, and trees in every direction. We packed heavy, tent, sleeping bags, axes, flashlights, and a huge hard plastic cooler loaded with food and beer. It was one of those rugged ones meant to keep things cold for days, and we brought 2 heavy-duty padlocks to lock it shut on both ends. We weren't taking chances with bears or raccoons. We even tied the handles of the cooler with rope around a thick tree trunk just to keep it from being dragged. The first day was perfect. We hiked a few trails nearby, chopped firewood, and spent most of the afternoon drinking by the fire. Started getting dark around 8. We cooked some sausages, had a few more beers, then doused the fire and got ready to sleep. Before crawling into our tents, we all walked over to the cooler and made sure it was locked. Tyler spun the dial on his padlock twice just to be safe. Both locks were tight. We even gave it a tug together. Solid. None of us slept all that well, which is pretty normal the first night out. You hear every twig snap, every breeze pushing through the trees. I remember waking up a few times and just listening, but nothing seemed off. No footsteps, no rustling, no sound of anything moving around our camp. When the sun came up, I unzipped my tent and walked over to the cooler. It was maybe 20 feet from where we'd slept. I froze. Both padlocks were off. Not broken or cut, just sitting side by side on top of the cooler. The rope we'd tied around the handles was untied, but neatly coiled and placed beside the locks. The lid was closed but unlatched. I didn't touch it right away. I just stared at it. Nate walked over behind me and saw it too. Neither of us said anything. Tyler came out a minute later and stood there looking down at it. I finally opened it. Half the food was gone. Not all of it, just random stuff. A couple of sandwich bags of cooked chicken, some cheese, a few beers, granola bars. The rest was untouched. Nothing else in the camp was moved or disturbed. Our gear was still where we left it. Even our firewood pile hadn't been messed with. We started looking around for prints. Nothing. The ground was soft enough that something heavy should have left tracks. But there weren't any. No paw prints, no boot treads, not even a scuff in the dirt near the cooler. It was like someone floated in, opened it up like they had the combination, took what they wanted, and left the locks there without waking any of us. The whole thing was unsettling. Too clean, too precise. But we stayed. We had 2 more days planned, and we figured maybe we forgot to lock it properly. Maybe the locks weren't clicked all the way. That was the easiest explanation. We told ourselves that. That evening, we put the remaining food and drinks back in the cooler, locked it tight again, but this time we didn't leave it outside. We put it in the back of the SUV and locked the car too. All the doors, windows shut. We made sure of it. That night, none of us drank. We kept the fire going longer than the night before. No one wanted to be the first to sleep. We took turns walking to the edge of the clearing with flashlights, listening. Nothing seemed strange. No sounds, no lights, just normal forest quiet. Eventually, we all went to bed. I didn't sleep much. I kept waking up, listening. Nothing. No sound. I could see the SUV from the mesh window of my tent. It never moved. When I finally got up around 6, it was already light out. I walked straight to the SUV. The rear passenger door on the driver's side was wide open. The cooler was still inside, but the lid was off. The food that was left gone. All of it. The beer cans too. The locks were sitting neatly again, right on the back seat beside the cooler. Not scratched, not cut. The car doors had no signs of damage. It wasn't forced open. It was just open. That's when it hit all of us. Someone had been watching. Had to be. There's no way they would have known the cooler was in the car unless they'd seen us move it. And they weren't smashing anything. They weren't leaving trash behind. They weren't animals. Whoever it was had keys or tools or something, and they moved quiet enough that 3 grown men didn't hear a single sound. Not locks being opened, not doors being opened, not food being moved. It was worse than a bear. At least with animals, you expect chaos. Scratches, torn bags, trash everywhere. This was clean, controlled, almost polite. We didn't eat breakfast. We didn't talk much. We just packed up and left. Rolled up the tents, tossed everything into the back, and drove out. Nobody argued about it. We were all on edge. The drive back was quiet, no music, no joking around. We didn't report it. Who would we report it to? Someone opened our cooler and took our food without leaving a trace? It would sound stupid, but that feeling that someone was out there, that they came into our camp, twice without any noise and with that kind of precision, stuck with me. We'd been deep in the woods, miles from any town, from any trailhead. No one should have been out there, and yet they were. Close enough to watch us, smart enough to wait, skilled enough to come and go without waking a single one of us. And they didn't take anything else, just food and beer. Whoever it was, they weren't hungry enough to steal everything. They weren't desperate. They were selective, like they just wanted to remind us that they could. I haven't gone back into the woods since. Not like that. Not that deep. Not without cell service. Not without knowing what's around me. You expect wild animals in the forest. You prepare for that. But someone walking around your camp in the dark with that kind of calm, opening locks, slipping into cars without a sound, that's different. That's worse. Because they're not trying to scare you. They're not even trying to hurt you. They're just showing you they were there, and that they could have done anything they wanted. My girlfriend and I had been planning the trip for months. We both needed a break from work, from people, from everything. She found this remote campsite deep inside Olympic National Forest. It was tucked into a thick patch of trees, a little off the trail, maybe 2 hours hike from the nearest gravel road. We liked how isolated it was. No cell service, no sounds of traffic or other people. Just trees, mountains, and quiet. We got there late in the afternoon, set up the tent near a ridge that gave us a beautiful view of the valley below. The air smelled like pine and damp moss. There was a kind of stillness there I hadn't felt in a long time. We set up our little camp, pitched the tent, unrolled our sleeping bags, gathered some rocks for a fire ring. I got water from a nearby stream while she set up the food. Everything felt perfect, like a real escape. By nightfall, the forest had gone completely dark. There was no moon, and the trees were so dense, the stars barely peeked through. We lit a small fire and sat close to it, eating instant noodles out of plastic bowls. The fire crackled quietly, and the woods around us were mostly silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. We turned in around 10, after dousing the fire and packing up the food in a bear bag we hung from a high branch a few yards away. Inside the tent, the sleeping bags were warm, and I remember how the forest felt like it was pressing in all around us. Not in a creepy way at first, but more like a thick blanket of quiet. I fell asleep to the sound of wind passing through the tall trees above us. Sometime in the night, I woke up. No noise, no light, just this heavy stillness. I didn't know why I was awake at first. I stared at the roof of the tent, barely able to make it out in the dark. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy ones, not crunching through brush, but moving softly over the ground. Deliberate. They circled the tent once, then again. It wasn't an animal. I've heard raccoons, deer, even bears before. This was different. 2 legs, a slow, dragging walk. I lay completely still. I didn't even breathe loud. I felt her next to me, completely still too. She was awake. I didn't need to say anything. Then something pressed against the side of the tent. Not a hand or a paw exactly, but something pushed in, right at my side, just once, firm enough to move the nylon, like someone was testing it. Then it was gone. We didn't move, didn't make a sound. Minutes passed, or maybe it was hours, I had no way to tell. Nothing else happened after that. The footsteps didn't return. No more pressure on the tent. Just silence, and the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Eventually, the dark turned gray. Birds started up, soft and scattered. I opened the tent zipper slowly and looked out. The air was cold and wet, dew clinging to everything. I stepped out barefoot and checked the ground. Boot prints. They circled the tent at least twice. Big ones. Not hiking boots like mine, these had a flatter sole, maybe work boots. They weren't fresh anymore, but they were clear. You could see the heel drag in some of them. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She was already getting dressed, packing up the sleeping bags. She saw them too. That's when I saw the twine. It was stretched between 2 trees maybe 20 feet from us. Tied tight, low to the ground, about knee height. Someone had set it up like a tripwire. It didn't belong there. It wasn't for camping. It was just there. Quiet, subtle. The kind of thing you wouldn't see in the dark. We packed up in under 5 minutes. No food, no coffee, no conversation. Just everything back in our packs. Boots tied tight, tent stuffed in without folding. We hiked back down the trail with barely a word. Both of us kept looking behind us, listening for anything. Footsteps, voices, even just twigs snapping. But there was nothing. The trail felt longer than I remembered, like the woods had grown thicker overnight. Every sound made me jump. I kept imagining someone stepping out from behind the trees or hearing footsteps behind us. But it never came. We got back to the car by noon, still the only one parked at the trailhead. I remember my hands were shaking as I unlocked the doors. We didn't even take off our packs, just tossed them in the back and got in. I drove out of there faster than I should have on those gravel roads, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. We didn't talk much on the drive back to town. When we stopped for gas, I checked my phone. Dozens of missed messages, voicemails, updates. But none of it mattered. Not right then. We told ourselves maybe it was a hunter. Maybe someone just passing through the forest, curious about our tent. But the prints, the pressure on the fabric, that tripwire, none of it made sense. Who sets a tripwire in the middle of a national forest? Who walks circles around a tent in the dead of night and just disappears? We never went back to that spot. Never even tried to. Sometimes I think about it, what could have happened if I'd said something, if I'd stepped out of the tent, if I'd tripped on that wire. Whatever it was, whoever it was, they were close, watching us, close enough to touch the tent, close enough to set something up while we slept a few feet away. That was the last time we camped somewhere without cell service. The last time we went that deep into the woods. I still go hiking. I still love the mountains. But that night is always in the back of my mind. Quiet, patient, like footsteps just outside the tent. I went camping with my cousin a few summers ago up in Colorado, near the San Juan Mountains. We'd been talking about getting off-grid for a while, and finally both had time off work. Our plan was to hike out past the regular trails, find a remote place to set up camp, and stay a couple of nights without phones or distractions. We parked at a trailhead that wasn't too popular and hiked most of the afternoon, following a winding path that ran along a ridge, then dipped down into thicker forest. It was cooler under the trees, quiet too. Just the sound of our boots on leaves, birds up in the canopy, and the occasional rustle from the underbrush. After a few hours, we came across a clearing that felt just right. Flat ground, enough room for a tent and a fire, surrounded by tall pines and aspen. No sign that anyone had camped there before. No fire rings, no trash, not even a broken branch that looked cut. It felt untouched, peaceful even. We dropped our packs, stretched out, and started setting things up. I took care of the tent while my cousin cleared space for the fire. We'd both done this enough to not need to talk much. Just a quiet rhythm of chores. By the time we got the fire going, the sun had already dipped low, turning the tops of the trees orange. The light filtering through the forest made everything feel soft and calm. We sat on some rocks and boiled water for our freeze-dried meals, not saying much. It was that comfortable kind of silence you get with someone you've known your whole life. Then my cousin froze. He was holding his metal cup, halfway to his mouth, and he just stopped. He didn't say anything at first, just stared past me, eyes fixed on something behind me. I started to turn my head, but before I could, he said quietly, not even looking at me, "Don't look now, but there's a guy watching us." My stomach dropped. I turned anyway. At the edge of the tree line, maybe 40 yards away, stood a man, just standing, not moving, not leaning against anything, just standing upright, arms at his sides. He wasn't wearing any bright colors, no blaze orange or neon hiker gear, just dull brown pants and a gray jacket. No backpack, no walking stick, no hat, nothing to suggest he was out hiking or camping. He looked like someone who had just walked out of an office, not the woods. He didn't wave, didn't step forward, didn't say a word. I raised my hand and gave a short wave anyway, trying to keep it casual. No response. My cousin did the same. Still nothing. We both watched him, saying nothing. I couldn't make out his face. The trees behind him were thick, casting long shadows, and the low light made it hard to see details. After a minute or two, without turning around, he started stepping backward into the trees. Slow, steady steps, like he was melting into the forest. Then he was gone. We didn't move for a long time, just sat by the fire, not even talking. Finally, I stood up and scanned the tree line, trying to spot him again. Nothing. I circled the clearing a few times, slowly, looking and listening. I didn't hear anything. No twigs snapping, no voices, no movement, just the wind pushing through the trees. We didn't pack up or run. I don't know why. Maybe we thought he was just some hiker who had gotten turned around. But something about the way he stood there, the way he left without a word, didn't sit right with either of us. We decided to keep the fire burning all night. It didn't seem smart to let it go out. It felt like the only thing keeping the dark from pressing in too close. We didn't sleep. We laid in the tent, fully clothed, each of us with a knife close by and headlamps within reach. Every few minutes, one of us would sit up and listen. The fire crackled. A couple times, an owl called or something shifted in the brush, and we both froze. But there were no footsteps, no voices. The man never came back. Or if he did, he didn't make a sound. The night was long. At one point, around 3 in the morning, I thought I saw movement through the mesh window of the tent. Just a flicker, like something moving just outside the firelight. I sat there for over an hour watching the spot, but I never saw anything clearly. When the sun started to rise, we both got up without saying anything and started packing. We didn't talk about the man. We just moved quickly, breaking down the tent, dumping the last of the water on the fire, making sure we left no trace. It wasn't until I started coiling up one of the ropes that I noticed something maybe 20 feet from where the tent had been. On the ground, half covered in pine needles, was a thick branch. It was placed in a way that didn't look natural. It wasn't fallen. It wasn't broken off from any tree nearby. It had been placed. Deliberately, the bark had been stripped from one side, revealing the pale wood underneath. It was shaped into a rough arrow, pointing directly at the spot where our tent had been. Not just near it, exactly where it had been. I stared at it for a long time. My cousin walked over and saw it too. We didn't say a word. We didn't need to. Neither of us had done it. It hadn't been there when we set up the tent. And it hadn't been there the night before when we kept checking the perimeter. Whoever that man was, he'd come back. Sometime during the night, maybe while we were lying awake just a few feet away, he had stepped into our camp and placed that branch. Quietly, carefully, close enough to touch the tent. And we hadn't heard a thing. We didn't eat, didn't stop to take photos. We just grabbed our gear and started hiking. We didn't speak until we were back on the main trail, hours later. Even then, we barely said a word, just enough to agree on which direction to head. I kept looking over my shoulder every so often, not because I thought I'd see him again, but because I needed to be sure he wasn't following. When we finally reached the car, I felt like I could breathe again. We didn't talk about reporting it. What would we say? A man watched us, then left a stick on the ground? No crime, no proof, just a feeling that stuck in our bones. We drove in silence most of the way back. That night, back home, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how quiet he had been, how easily someone can move through the woods if they want to, how close he must have gotten, and how he didn't take anything, didn't hurt us, didn't try to scare us outright. He just wanted us to know he was there, and that he could come closer. I had been planning the trip for weeks. I needed to get away to clear my head. No campgrounds, no other people, no noise. Just me, my gear, and the river. I picked a spot along the Merced River that I'd found on an old hiking forum. A bend in the river, miles off the main trail. No designated sites, just flat land, trees, and water. I parked on a dirt turnout miles up a forestry road and hiked in with everything I needed strapped to my back. The day had been calm. Warm sun, not too hot. The trail was overgrown in places, but nothing I couldn't push through. I saw a few deer and one black bear from a distance, but nothing else. No people, no hikers. I set up my tent about 15 feet from the river, where the trees opened up enough to give me a good view of the water. The ground was soft and level. I made a small fire pit with stones, cooked some food, then sat on a log by the water until the stars came out. There was no reception, no signal, just the sound of the river and the occasional rustle in the woods behind me. Peaceful. By around 10, I'd put out the fire, climbed into my tent, and zipped myself into the sleeping bag. The sound of the river was loud enough to cover most small noises, but not too loud. I lay there listening, my mind slowly drifting. I remember the moon was full that night, and through the thin fabric of the tent, it lit everything in a pale silver glow. Sometime past midnight, I woke up needing to pee. I tried to ignore it, roll over, fall back asleep, but it wasn't happening. So I unzipped the bag, pulled on my boots, and stepped out into the cold night air. The temperature had dropped sharply. I could see my breath. The trees were still barely moving. Everything had that quiet, heavy feel that only comes deep in the woods at night, far from any road. I walked a few feet from the tent toward the tree line on the river's edge. As I stood there, about to take a piss, I heard it voices. 2 of them, male, somewhere off to my left, maybe 30 or 40 feet into the trees. I froze. They weren't whispering. They weren't even trying to be quiet, just talking in normal tones, calm like they were sitting around a fire. But there was no fire, no light, just their voices. I couldn't make out the words. It wasn't the river, it was the way they spoke. Not loud, not mumbling, just that normal tone people use when they're relaxed. I remember thinking how weird that was. No urgency, no laughter, just talking, the way people do when they've known each other a long time. A few pauses. One voice would go quiet, then the other. Sometimes they overlapped, but I couldn't understand a single word. I crouched down behind a fallen log and stayed there, holding my breath. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I hadn't seen a single person all day. No hikers, no cars on the road, no fires in the distance. I was miles from the nearest campground. Whoever they were, they had come in on foot just like me. But why here? Why this far in, with no fire, no gear I could see, no sign of them at all? I stayed crouched for what felt like 10 minutes, maybe more. The voices just stopped, not faded away, not walked off, just stopped, like someone hit mute. I stayed there a while longer, listening. Nothing, just the river again. Eventually, I stood up slowly, legs cramping from crouching so long. I scanned the trees. Still nothing. I walked back to the tent quietly, turned off my headlamp before I got close, and climbed back inside. I didn't zip the sleeping bag. I didn't sleep. I lay there, eyes wide open, straining to hear anything over the rush of the river. Every little crack in the woods made me jump. I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I was hearing things. Maybe echoes or some guys camped a little upstream. But there had been no light, no fire. Who camps like that? Just sits in the dark? When the sky finally started to brighten, I climbed out of the tent, exhausted. The woods looked totally different in the daylight. Normal again. Birds chirping, the sun hitting the tops of the trees. I walked the area around my tent carefully, checking the soft ground near the river. No boot prints, no trampled grass, nothing that suggested anyone had been nearby. I widened the search, going further into the trees where I thought the voices had come from. Still nothing. No wrappers, no smoke, no disturbed leaves, just forest. But when I walked down toward the bend in the river, near a flat rock shelf that jutted out over the water, I saw it. A cigarette butt, pale filter just barely stained at the end. Still a little warm when I picked it up, like it had been smoked less than an hour before. No other sign of anyone, just that. No ash, no pack, no prints. I don't smoke. I hadn't seen anyone. And the wind that morning was dead still. That cigarette hadn't blown in from anywhere. Someone had been standing right there, smoking, watching the river, watching me. That spot had a clear line of sight to my camp. You could see the tent from there, the fire ring, even the log I'd been sitting on. It wasn't coincidence. I didn't stay for breakfast. I packed everything fast. Didn't even boil water. Just broke down the tent, stuffed everything into the pack, and started hiking out. I kept looking over my shoulder every few minutes, convinced I'd see someone standing just inside the trees. But no one ever showed. I made it back to the road by late morning, my legs sore, throat dry. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked. I didn't relax until I was an hour down the highway, headed back toward the city. I've camped a lot in my life. I've heard coyotes, bears, even people yelling from other camps late at night. But I've never heard voices like that. Calm, unhurried, in the middle of nowhere. And I've never found a still warm cigarette in a place no one should have been. I never went back to that spot. I didn't post about it on the forum. I didn't tell many people. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I think about how they never walked off, never made a sound leaving, just stopped talking. And I wonder if they were still there, standing silently in the dark, listening to me breathe.